Hello everyone. Do Trinitarian academics hear Jesus? Can they hear what he's saying? Does it sink in? Do the words of Jesus sink in? It's a very important question because many times in the Gospel of John, Jesus testifies that his words are not his own, but the Father's who sent him. He does this in many places in various ways. In John 8, the Jews are pressing Jesus up, on the question, who do you think you are? And Jesus is actually explaining himself. Do Trinitarian academics hear him? The Jews didn't. It didn't sink in. So I just want to read this for you here from John 8, starting at verse 43. Why do you not understand what I am saying? It is because you cannot hear my word. You are of your father the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies. These guys lied about Jesus and murdered him, didn't he? Or didn't they? Peter says so. He puts the onus on the Jews for killing Jesus. But because I speak the truth, you do not believe me. Which one of you convicts me of sin? If I speak the truth, why do you not believe me? He who is of God hears the words of God. For this reason, you do not hear them, because you are not of God. John 8:43 to 47. Do Trinitarian academics hear Jesus when he's speaking at John 8:12 to 8:58? Do they hear him? That question, I believe, is really going to shed a very, very, very bright light on this Trinity debate. Big light. Have you ever noticed that Trinitarian academics seem to be able to hear these Jews loud and clear? But do they hear Jesus? When they say, who can forgive sins but God alone? They hear that loud and clear. And they agree with the Pharisees who said that, even though the very point of the passage is that Jesus proved them to be wrong. Whenever the Jews, who Jesus says are liars, accuse Jesus of something, they hear it loud and clear. And they agree with the Jews, and they'll say the Jews knew what Jesus was saying and stuff like this. They hear it loud and clear. But do these Trinitarian academics hear Jesus? And this is what John 8:12 to verse 58 is about. Concerning who Jesus is. And Jesus is explaining himself, but they can't hear him. They don't hear him. It's a very good exercise for anyone to go through the New Testament, mainly the Gospels, but Paul says some things about, Jews of the same ilk as well. But in the Gospels, Jesus makes many statements about these Jewish religious leaders. And he refers to them in all kinds of ways. Lawless, hypocrites, vipers, snakes, sons of hell, sons of the devil, murderers, liars, and a whole bunch more stuff. It's a very good exercise to make a list of those things. And it's interesting when Trinitarians interpret John 8:58, it's like, oh, they knew what Jesus was saying. Even though in John 8, Jesus says, why can you not understand what I'm saying? They didn't hear Jesus, did they? They have the Jews clearly understanding what Jesus is saying. At John 5:31, Jesus said, if I testify about myself, my testimony is not true. What do Trinitarian academics have Jesus doing at John 8:58? They have him testifying about himself in the highest way possible, claiming to be the God of these Jews, God Most High. But Jesus said, if I testify about myself, my testimony is not true. And at John 8:54, just a few verses before 8:58, Jesus said, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. He said this in response to this question. Who do you make yourself out to be? If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. So concerning the question, who do you make yourself out to be? Trinitarians have Jesus testifying that he's God Most High in the next breath at John 8:58. And his self-glorification means everything, in direct contradiction to Jesus' words at John 8:54. If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. He also says this at verse 50, but I do not seek my own glory. Jesus is telling us that he is not going to glorify himself concerning who he is. And if he does testify about himself, his testimony is not true. What does that make the Trinitarian interpretation of John 8:58? Well, if you can hear Jesus, it makes their interpretation not true. Oddly, though, they can't hear Jesus. They can't hear what he's saying. Just like these Jews can't hear what Jesus is saying. And oddly enough, even though Jesus says they can't understand what he's talking about because they are not of God, Trinitarian academics declare they clearly understood what Jesus was talking about at John 8:58. You see the problem here? Jesus is explaining himself to these Jews throughout this dialogue, and they don't get it. They're deaf as a fence post when it comes to his words. And just like he does in many other places in the Gospel of John, several times in this very dialogue, he tells them that he's only speaking what the Father gives him to say. Remember John 1:18? Jesus expresses or explains or unfolds the Father. But these Trinitarian academics aren't hearing him. And Jesus is explaining that he agrees that this idea that you need two witnesses to have a true testimony. Two. Jesus can't just testify about himself. Listen carefully to what Jesus said at John 5:31. If I testify about myself, my testimony is not true. This is what Trinitarians have Jesus doing at John 8:58. Now listen to Jesus if you can hear him. There is another who testifies of me, and I know that the testimony which he gives about me is true. How did the Father do that? How was the Father testifying about Jesus? Because that's what Jesus is talking about. The Father is testifying about Jesus and everything he's saying and everything he's doing. But they don't hear him. They don't hear him. And in a very similar manner, Jesus says this, John 8:50. But I do not seek my own glory. There is one who seeks and judges. There's two witnesses here. Two. At verse 54, if I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say he is our God. Why don't they hear Jesus? Why don't Trinitarian academics hear Jesus when he's saying these things? Why don't they remember that when they interpret John 8:58? They don't. His words mean nothing to him or to them when they interpret John 8:58. Jesus started out this whole dialogue by saying, I am the light of the world. Ego eimi, the light of the world. And he finishes it by saying, before Abraham was, I am. Ego eimi. At 1 John 1:5, John tells us that God is light, God the Father. And we know it's referring to God the Father at 1 John 1:5 because it goes on to refer to his Son, Jesus. So God the Father is light. Now think about John 1:9, the true light, which enlightens every man, was coming into the world. And in John 1:18, Jesus, that flesh named Jesus, expresses the Father. Two witnesses. Two. Jesus did the works of the Father. He spoke the words of the Father. His words were not his own, but the Father's who sent him. And that's all he did. He only did what the Father gave him to do and gave him to say, because he did not seek to do his own will or come to do his own will, but only the will of the Father. These Jews could not hear Jesus. Jesus explains right here that they're liars and murderers and they can't understand him. Yet, when it comes to John 8:58, Trinitarian academics have it that, well, these Jews were so righteous that they thought they were keeping their law, right? And so they thought they had to stone him because they clearly understood what he was saying. In total contradiction to everything that was just said in this chapter. Why do they do this? Because they do not hear Jesus. And that's why this passage sheds a very, very bright light on Trinitarian academia. These men are on record. Their writings have been on record for 1,600 years. Thousands of Trinitarian academics over the past 1,600 years, libraries and libraries of books on record. They're on record now. And what's going to happen when it's clearly shown that they could not hear Jesus at John 8? What's going to happen? People are going to go back and read what Jesus said about this. Why do you not understand what I am saying? It is because you cannot hear my word. You are of your father, the devil. He who is of God hears the words of God. For this reason, you do not hear them, because you are not of God. Jesus says something similar in John 10 about his sheep being able to hear his voice. And he explains, you do not believe me or hear me because you're not my sheep. If you're a Trinitarian layperson, you don't need to get freaked out about this if you don't understand what's going on in John 8. Jesus' disciples, he says you're dull of hearing. That's probably true for every one of us to some degree. Okay, so don't get freaked out about it in that manner. But what was the difference between Jesus' disciples and these Jews? Jesus' disciples wanted to understand. They wanted to. These Jews here in John 8, they did not. They just wanted to kill him. They didn't like what Jesus said and what Jesus did, because they had their own agenda. Just like Trinitarian academics have their own agenda. The Trinitarian idol, a man-made God, the product of human minds. Because you won't find the Trinity anywhere else. The only place you can find it is the product of a human mind. Think about this carefully. When you read John 8, just keep some certain things in mind. John 5:31, if I testify about myself, my testimony is not true. John 8:54, if I glorify myself concerning who I am, my glory means nothing. It is my Father who glorifies me. How does the Father do this? The Father is that light of 1 John 1:5. And Jesus, that fleshly man, expresses the Father, John 1:18, which is why Jesus could say, I am the light of the world. And think about those things when Jesus is telling you there's two witnesses in John 8, and that he speaks the words of the Father. And then you'll be able to hear, hopefully, what Jesus is saying. If you truly desire to hear what Jesus is saying, rather than what the devil is saying. Because that's what these Jews wanted to hear. You are your father, the devil, and you want to do the will or the desires of your father. There's a lot of people like that. The Spirit of truth guides us into all truth. If you can't hear what Jesus is saying, maybe it's because the Spirit of truth is not guiding you into all truth. Or maybe it's because you really don't believe that the Spirit of truth will guide you into all truth. Do you believe Jesus' words there? The Spirit of truth will guide you into all truth. Do you believe him? If Trinitarian academics can't hear Jesus in John 8, just like these Jews can't hear him, what does that say? What does that say? I think what I'd like to do is just leave this right there and allow people to think about those things and to read through John 8 about how Jesus is explaining himself concerning who he is, and that there's two witnesses testifying to who he is. But the Jews don't hear him. And to just allow people to really think about that and meditate on that. You can comment on that if you like. I think I'd like to leave it there, just that way for now. This is really, really serious. I mean, can you see the seriousness of the matter in John 8 between Jesus and these Jews? He's calling them children of the devil. So you have the children of the devil on one side and the Son of God on the other. Think about that. And these guys want to kill Jesus. Jesus said so. You're seeking to kill me. And they're like, yeah, sure. And then they start with the ad hominem remarks, saying Jesus is a Samaritan, he has a demon. Think about those things, and then bring that into today. And ask yourself, based on everything that Jesus said in this chapter, whether Trinitarian academics hear what Jesus is saying. And then think about the implications of that. Think about the implications. Keep John 14:10 in mind as well. The Father abiding in me does the work. I do not speak from myself, but the Father abiding in me does the works. The Father testifies about me, Jesus says. The Father glorifies me. How? Do you ever hear Trinitarian academics even talking about that? Why can't they hear what Jesus is saying in John 8? Why do they hear the Pharisees, these Jews, loud and clear when they speak? Be very prayerful. Be very careful. Pray that the Spirit of truth will guide you into all truth, and believe. because it's true. God bless you.